It seems to me that that if you're going to make the claim of having authority over any other group of people, you better have a damn good reason for it, and that doesn't appear as self-evident or obvious to me at all. Don't believe everything you hear. Go out and see it for yourself, and as Doug Casey likes to say, learn by doing.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm here with an old good friend, Joel Bowman. Interesting story. I've known you for, I don't even know how long. I think 15, I don't even know.
At least 10 years, but I'd like to correct and say it's a young good friend.
Yeah, that's true. It's been a while though, and it's kind of funny because I only run into you maybe every 3 or 4 or 5 years. I've run into you maybe at Doug Casey's place in La Estancia de Cafajate, maybe, Buenos Aires. I think one other conference. Oh, I saw you in Vegas.
Liberty Fest.
Or Freedom Fest.
Freedom Fest, that's right.
Yeah, I only see you every few years, but like every time we get together, we're like totally, it's like we have seen each other all the time. It's like we're brothers from another mother or something.
Simpatico, yeah.
And part of the reason is that Joel was actually one of my favorite writers back in the early 2000s with Daily Reckoning. And you're a good friend of Doug Casey's, and I used to love your writing, and you kind of sort of went off the map for a little while and decided to have a family, and you've been living all around the world. You're actually currently in the process of just living out of a backpack with your family, or small luggage, as you could say. And just recently, you started working again with Doug Casey at International Man, and so I'm really excited about that. I've seen you started writing with that. And you can go check it out, internationalman.com, I think it is. I think right at the top it says, you know, how to free yourselves from these out-of-control politicians. Excellent stuff. But you are one of the best writers, and I should also mention Doug Casey's also a huge influence on my writing over the years. So, real pleasure. I've been wanting to have you on for a while. You're planning to come to Anarchapulco, hopefully speak there. Hopefully you'll be speaking at the Dollar Vigilante Summit as well. And we're catching up here in Mexico City the day before. You're probably leaving to go on your worldwide tour.
Yeah. It's as you said, I worked with Bill Bonner on the Daily Reckoning maybe for I want to say 6 or 8 years, writing from all around the world, and after that I moved to here in Mexico, where I was determined to pursue my lifelong goal of becoming a failed novelist, which went very well. Goal achieved. And then out of the blue, I got a call from Doug while I was sort of tapping away my keyboard one day, and I saw an email pop up from Doug, and he said he was taking International Man, the franchise, under his own control, and would I like to be a part of it? And you know, when Doug Casey invites you onto a business enterprise,
you'd be stupid to
you
not
say no
yes.
At your peril.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, he does very well whatever he does. And
exactly.
I know he kind of sold the Casey research there, so it was kind of his own thing for a while. Then he kind of partnered with some people. Then he basically kind of sold it to Agora, which you know quite well through Bill Bonner and those guys. But it appears like he's sort of taking a little bit of it back for his own personal now.
Yeah, we've been in, I guess you could say, control of the publication for the last 2 or 3 months, and we've upped production to, we've got 5 daily e-letters that go out per week. They're free to sign up to if anyone cares to do so.
Yeah, definitely do that. I just skimmed through, and just like in the old days when you used to write, as soon as I saw you wrote an article, I'd just be like all over it. Same with Doug Casey. As soon as I saw a new Doug Casey article, and both of them I saw that you have articles from yourself and Doug on the site. So definitely, if you're into things like what I talk about and Doug Casey, you definitely want to check out International Man.
Yeah, it's very kind. And I might also take this opportunity. We were just talking downstairs in the bar about the growth and strength to strength of Anarchapulco and everything you've done the last 5 years. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. So we should actually get to the normal format of Anarchast here. The first question I always ask everyone is, how did you become an anarchist?
Oh, well, very interesting question. I guess I wonder if people actually do become anarchists. In line of what we were just discussing earlier, I think it's maybe better described as a process of reversion to what we naturally are.
Yes.
I tend to doubt that the human species would have gotten along so far as we comparatively have had we favored coercion over cooperation and violence over voluntary interaction. So, I mean, just and viewers will recognize this, but in our daily interactions with people, you and I, or your friends, your community, your family, some overwhelming percentage of what we actually do and the way that we conduct business and the way that we conduct our daily affairs is in an anarchistic setting.
Absolutely.
We have barbecues, we mind each other's children, we go about our daily commercial and private lives under the idea that we're all individual sovereigns in charge of our own destiny. And so, apart from the times that we're, pulled over for on-the-spot fines by policemen, or when we have to, make out our tax returns or whatnot, by and large, humans, even today in 2018, with a state-saturated globe, we still go about our day-to-day interactions in mostly an anarchistic setting with an anarchistic mindset. So, I think it's really a process of unlearning what we go through during those years of indoctrination when we're forced through institutions, state-sponsored institutions, primary school, secondary school, tertiary education, which now, as you mentioned, seems to go on until you're 35 or 40 years old on your third PhD or whatever. But once we kind of unpack all of that indoctrination, it's not obvious, it's not self-evident that we ought to be operating in a kind of a power hierarchy where where there's this kind of authoritarian superstructure that overlords, that monitors us and invigilates our every move. So for somebody like me, it's the claim that structure is necessary or self-evident or valid just doesn't present itself that way. It seems to me that if you're going to make the claim of having authority over any other group of people, you better have a damn good reason for it, and that doesn't appear as self-evident or obvious to me at all.
No, not at all. And it is interesting. I've had about almost 500 episodes of Anarchast, and I always ask the first question, how do you become an anarchist? I'm starting to realize as well that the question should be, how did you remember you were an anarchist, or something along those lines?
In a past life, yeah.
or just because most people have become not anarchists or don't think they're anarchists because of all the coercion and all the state involvement in people's lives. So really what's really going on for most people is, and in the first few hundred interviews, a lot of people always had a good answer. They'd be like, I thought I was a total statist, and then one day I woke up and that's how I became an anarchist. But I think the true case is everyone's born an anarchist. There's no babies that come out and they're like, well, we need coerced, socialized extortion Medicare systems or something like that, right? So I think we're coming to this sort of realization now that we are all born anarchists, but some of us got kind of lost along the way. So with you personally, you were born in Australia. Did you always feel that government and no one had authority over you, or was there a moment in your life where it kind of, you woke up and went, wait a sec, these guys, who are these guys?
Right. Well, I guess any kind of power structure needs to validate itself. I mean, it needs to answer questions as to why it presumes to have ownership or control over you. And, if you ask those questions, then, usually you get very, very poor answers. It's answers like, well, if we didn't do this for you, then nobody would build the roads. Or if we didn't do this for you, then nobody would take care of your health care. If we didn't do this for you, then nobody would take care of your education. But, the old saying goes that nobody's going to give you the education to overthrow them. So you go to state universities; they're not in any way incentivized to disrupt the status quo, because it's on the teat of the status quo that they nourish themselves.
Yes.
So it's not as if they're about to say, yes, all the government funding that comes our way is ill-gotten, is extorted from people, and you may be better off doing without it. That would be death by 1,000 cuts. It would be counterproductive.
That's really the thing with humans, right? It's all about incentives. So with most people, so those people who work in those colleges or whatever, they have no incentive to point out that there's something kind of wrong with a lot of this stuff, right?
Right.
So that's, I think, what the government or the people in power have done to a good extent, is they've managed to put these incentive systems in place to get people to support them, because that's what most people will do. It's kind of sad. I wish it wasn't that case. I personally wouldn't do it. I would never work for a government. I would never be a cop, for example. Right. I'd never pull someone over and go, hey, I saw you didn't have your seatbelt on. You owe me $100 and I've got a gun, right? Like, that's, to me, is like, makes no sense. But, you know, certain people don't think that far, and that's also where the government education system comes in. They don't teach you how to think or anything. They just tell you, this is normal, this is the way it's always been. We have these people here, they're going to extort you, and they're going to tell you what to do, and they're going to train you in that way, right?
Well, if they taught you how to think for yourself, then you wouldn't be thinking for them.
Right.
And so, you know, the whole idea of the modern educational system as introduced to the United States and then proliferated around the world came from the Prussian model. Was introduced into the US by Horace Mann, and the idea was that they wanted to raise a very healthy, productive class of worker bees. You know, that was basically incentivized to promote the health of the colony and to promote the health of the queen bee. It wasn't a system that had at the forefront of its goal set individual liberty and, you know, self-analysis and self-realization and those kinds of very important concepts. So yeah, as I said, there's very, very little incentive for the system to change itself. Systemic change will come from disruptive factors without the system, not from within the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get back to the question I was trying to ask you before, because you seem really like almost like myself in a way, like that you never really understood this entire system. So was there ever a point where you were kind of like going to school and, oh yeah, well, the government and taxes, that's all fine, or were you always just kind of confused by this whole thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm delving back into my memory now, but I do remember, I guess I remember one kind of instance. It may have been grade 3 or grade 4, but when somebody in class stole somebody else's pencil or eraser or some article of stationery, and the teacher decided that it was a prudent move to hold everybody back through lunch. This idea
punish
of
everyone.
Collective punishment. And I remember thinking, well, I didn't steal that thing, so I'm out of here. I'm going to lunch, and being sent to the principal's office because I didn't adhere to the kind of regimental punishment system, and I didn't kowtow to the necessary authority. And I remember distinctly thinking at that stage that the idea of collective punishment and of collectivism in general was just an untenable idea, and actually anathema to the idea of individual freedom.
That's great, that at grade 3. So yeah, we're very similar in that way. I was in those government indoctrination camps. I think it was around grade 7 or so that I was like, what?
Right.
They tell me what to do. I don't want to learn this stuff. I don't care about chemistry or physics. I cared about, after 9/11, I cared a little bit about physics. I'm like, oh, it's all possible, what happened there. But in general, that wasn't my interest. I was actually much more interested in things like English, like language, writing. Sure. I always enjoyed reading and writing. That was something I always enjoyed. So I think very similarly, even at a young age, we realized there was something wrong with the system, but a lot of people don't, and it's because they've kind of like indoctrinated them so much, and we're talking now not even decades, but even almost like centuries now of indoctrination, to the point where you go back to a place like Australia, and you were just mentioning to me, it's like, don't they realize the pot is boiling? But it happens incrementally, right. And because they haven't got this information, they just assume everything's fine, but it's getting worse and worse.
Right. Well, it's the analogy of the frog in the boiling water is an apt one here, because if you spend enough time outside of that cauldron where the temperature isn't gradually heating up, then you dive back in after a little while and you realize your skin's burning off, and you realize that this is suboptimal outcome. So it's really about going, traveling, being an international man, if you can, and trying to expose yourself to as many other differing cultures and mindsets and ideologies, and then you realize that the one that you happen to have been born into by pure accident of birth may not necessarily be the one that you wish to adhere to for your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said my whole life, I think, travel is the best education, and you've got a 3-year-old daughter now, speaks English and Spanish. She's about to embark on about a 30-country world tour. She's got friends in all these countries. Yeah. So she's already advanced more than your average 50-year-old, really, in the U.S. or something like that. She speaks different languages. She understands that the world, there's different cultures, and some places are, there's better things in this place and worse things in that place, and there's no perfect place. I think we can agree on that. But let's get into the international man sort of an aspect of it, because this is something that a lot of people really are interested in. This is something I've been doing for at least 20 years. Once I sold my internet company in Canada, and I was like, as soon as I could leave Canada, I was out of there. And it wasn't because Canada's the worst place on earth. There is a few worse. The US is a little worse. North Korea, I hear, is a little worse, stuff like that. What was that?
It's just an earthquake alarm, but it'll pass. And we're in a fairly modern building, so
we'll be fine. If we die, it's fine. Whatever. Yeah.
Let's at least die recording this.
It's not live, so maybe we'll dig it up at some point to put it live. But yeah, there's earthquakes here in Mexico City every now and then. But I kind of almost lost my train of thought there. But basically, talking about travel and the importance of it. Perspective, yeah, because your average American, for example. I didn't feel any earthquakes. So
that's moderado. We may feel a little shake in a second.
If you couldn't hear it, they're doing some sort of earthquake warning or something. But your average person in the U.S., for example, most of them, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's almost everyone doesn't have a passport. So it's almost like growing up in North Korea, right? You grow up, there's little Kim Sung, he's the god or the guy, he takes care of all us. That's basically what Americans kind of think. Now they have the two-party system in the US, so like, well, if this guy's right, I don't like him, or if this guy's left, I don't like him. But in general, they're taking care of us, right?
Right.
And it's once you get outside of that system, right.
Yeah, it's the false illusion of choice. The Greeks had a term for it, the dilemma, which is basically, do you want to be gored by the right horn of the bull, or do you wish to be gored by the left horn of the bull? Left out of the suite of choices is, do you not wish to be gored at all? So that's what's called the false dilemma. But and to continue with that example, the very idea you spoke of earlier of anarchy, the word is besmirched. It comes, as you know, from the Greek anarchos, which means without head or without ruler, and that choice is left out of the equation. It's, do you choose your left ruler or do you choose your right ruler? There's no.
Can't we be all bipartisan and just agree just to have a ruler?
Right,
that's the only choice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're too left or you're too right, or but no matter what, that's the only choice, right? It's interesting too, because as you mentioned, the word anarchy came from Greece. Democracy, or as I call it, democracy, came from Greece. And then they have this also dilemma that came from Greece. So they actually kind of, I don't know what happened there. I'm not a big historian. I've never looked into it. But so they kind of came up with all these ideas and kind of realized a lot of them were kind of wrong, maybe, by coming up with this.
Yeah, well, they didn't realize that they didn't realize the shortcomings of them quick enough. Those who know the classic buffs. My wife runs a newsletter dedicated to the classics, but
really?
very, very shortly after the Greeks gifted us the political system that we know as democracy, they voted by majority vote to kill who was Socrates, probably their greatest philosopher.
That sounds pretty ironic.
And the charge against him...
That's Alanis Morissette for Socrates.
Right.
Isn't it ironic? You create democracy and they vote to kill you.
Yes, exactly. And the charge
against
him... Talk
about instant karma.
Yes, exactly. It came back to bite them very quickly, because not only did they kill perhaps their greatest philosopher, the charges leveled against him were of corrupting the youth. So it was corrupting the youth against the prevailing ideas of the state that Socrates was charged with and eventually perished because of.
Wow, yeah. I don't look into a lot of that stuff, but I keep hearing it and it makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting. I just don't have all the time to look into all this stuff. But One thing that a lot of people are very interested in, I was trying to bring up earlier, is this whole idea of being a permanent traveler, a prior taxpayer, a international man. And you have right on the front page of your website with Doug Casey, how to escape being subservient to these politicians. You've lived very internationally. I don't even know for how long. When did you leave Australia, and where have you lived since then? And give us some of the experience of living around the world.
Yeah, I left Australia, I think I was 18 at the time. I was...
as soon as you were allowed to leave?
Yes.
That's almost the same as me.
I remember sitting around, another one of those sort of moments of clarity. I remember sitting around, I was going to law school at the time, which for those who know me now is very difficult to believe.
Yeah, that does not jive.
But I remember.
I'm going to enforce the rules of the authorities on people.
I remember sitting in torts class or something, and looking around, studying very hard and looking around, thinking, even if I spend every weekend studying, and even if I top this class, I'm going to have to barbecue with all these assholes every weekend. And that just seemed like such a terrible purgatory for me that I thought there must be a better way. So I left quickly with a very good buddy of mine. We went to England. We thought at the time we were blazing a new trail, and then we got there and discovered that we were in a place nicknamed Kangaroo Court, and that no shortage of Australians had made that trek back to the motherland before us. And then, so having discovered that, I went to the United States. I was very enamored with the idea of the Constitution,
free markets,
and all that kind of stuff. Well, I wasn't there for that long, and then I moved around various other places after that.
Cool.
I was a bit of a, as you mentioned before, I was working with Bill Bonner and Addison Wigan on the Daily Reckoning. And we kind of considered ourselves bubble connoisseurs in a way, and we were interested in becoming students of economic collapses and things like that. So around 2007, I decided that it was useful perhaps to go to Dubai, the city of gold, to learn both about economic collapse and also to spend some time in the there goes that. And also spend some time in the gold souks, trading physical bullion with the Indian and Emirati traders there, and learning about gold markets and learning about what would eventually become this huge economic bubble in Dubai. And so that was kind of as Doug likes to say, you learn by doing. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the backdrop of some formative education in real world economics, real world trade, real world commerce. Real world hand-to-hand trading in the gold markets, watching spot prices, that kind of stuff. So that kind of laid a good foundation for those subjects that kind of interested me at the time.
That's great. And then after that, you've went on, I know you were living in Argentina for quite a while, so give us even more perspective on what happened after that, going international.
So I moved, it's no secret that there's not a boneheaded economic policy that Argentina ever met that it didn't like. So after the Middle East, I moved to the Far East for a little while to Taiwan, and then discovering that they didn't like their leisure time as much as I did, I decided to move down to Argentina.
There's less Barbies and
less barbecues. People. Kids falling asleep with calculus books. This high and that high in coffee shops. And anyway, I moved down to Argentina, and again, that was another. It was another really good real-world classroom in learning about the follies of Keynesian economics. It was, it's a kind of a real-world, real-time example of what not to do with regards to economic policy. So, for example, there's a well-known economic axiom, I guess, or law called Gresham's law, mm-hmm. Which goes along the lines of bad money drives out good. So in any closed economic system, you have, if you have competing currencies, then people tend to quote unquote hoard, which is to say save the stronger performing currencies, mm-hmm. and they get rid of the currencies that's burning a hole in their pocket, as is happening with the bolivars in Venezuela, as happened in Zimbabwe and Weimar Republic and all these other kinds of places. So I get to see very up close and personally with my friends and I down in Argentina, that people would save gold, they would save tangible assets, they'd save dollars, and as soon as their Argentine pesos came into their possession, they would they'd race down the markets and buy a decent Malbec or a juicy beef Lomo or whatever, and
that's what I do with the U.S. dollars, by the way. But.
Yes, exactly. Well, and so now we have an even better form of currency, which people tend to save and to save in. But those kinds of lessons, you're not going to get them in a classroom. You're not going to have some teacher who is incentivized to promulgate a Keynesian philosophy tell you that, hey, this is how you disrupt the status quo of which we are an integral part. You need to go to places where real world economic lessons bear themselves out in real time. And that old saying that you can ignore reality but you can't ignore the effects of ignoring reality comes into hyper relief in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought cryptos, maybe we can get into that. But I want to keep on this a little bit longer because you lived in Argentina for a while, you've been here in Mexico for a little bit, and you've been talking about how much you've enjoyed sort of the culture, especially the family part of the culture. And so a lot of people out there will say, oh my God, you lived in Argentina, wasn't that dangerous? It sounds crazy to us because we've been there. And Mexico as well. Oh, you're in Mexico City, isn't it? I saw a movie with Denzel Washington from Hollywood. It sounds really dangerous. So a little bit of perspective on just living in the Latin culture from a family perspective, maybe.
Sure. Well, I mean, I also lived in West Baltimore.
Yeah, that's where Agora was. Yeah, which is kind of funny to me personally, because Agora is probably one of the biggest financial publishing companies in the world. I don't know if they still are, but they were. And they talk a lot about a lot of this stuff, but then they're based in West Baltimore.
Well, I think they have offices kind of all over the world, certainly at this stage. But yeah, it's interesting, what you see on the mainstream news about the narco civil war down here. You were just up in Michoacan, and no doubt perceived quite the opposite.
Just for people, I just came back from Cherán, Michoacan. They've kicked out the government, the police, and the politicians, and that's about it. Yeah, about 7 years ago, and it was one of the nicest places I ever visited in my life. Which is, I wasn't actually that shocked. Yeah. But if you look at the U.S. government, State Department, they say that whole area is a no-go zone. Mm-hmm. It's a red zone, like you're going to die for sure.
Well, they don't want you to go to the alternative. They don't want you to go to paradise. And I mean, getting back to a little bit of perspective, here in the Latin world, it would be naive to say there weren't problems in Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador in particular, with the various, drug trades there largely, and kind of an offshoot of the US's war on drugs. I mean, not largely, pretty much entirely, but so, okay. Let's say that Honduras has the largest or the highest murder rate per capita on the planet, which it does as a so-called nation state, but it doesn't have any higher murder rate than does New Orleans. It's about 90 per 100,000. So if we want to look at quote-unquote shitholes around the world, New Orleans is just as bad off, for all the great jazz music and fun you can have in New Orleans. It's not that much different than certain parts of Honduras, and as you discovered, certain parts of the nation state of Mexico are, very very peaceful, and you can get along just fine.
And there's certain parts you probably don't want to go. That's one thing I really learned from Doug Casey personally. He was telling me about how he was in Beirut during one of the wars that was going on. Again, I'm not a history guy, but I know there was a war going on, and he was like, yeah, if you stayed in the, I forget east or west, east part of town, yeah, it was pretty bad. You might get bombed and stuff. We stayed in the west, and it was just nice, fancy restaurants, and the war's over there. It's almost like anything. It's like if you go to Chicago, Chirac, right? Yeah, you can have the greatest life in Chicago pretty much if you got money, live in a nice part of town, and you'd probably be totally fine. You go to the south side, yeah, you might get shot.
Yes, exactly. I was in Chicago just last week, and what you say is exactly the case. I mean, I guess there's this kind of this imagined delineation where we've imagined these nation-state borders, and we've imagined them into existence, and they really do exist insofar as if you cross over one without permission from a state, you're likely to get shot or caged or tased or have some other
Extorted
unpleasant experience. But these are really just arbitrary lines drawn on a map that doesn't come with pre-perforations. So if you look at the world beyond borders, then you start to realize that even within small towns, small communities, states, nations, that there are better and worse places to live. And if you write off an entire region just because of a government website that's shaded it in crimson or something, then you do yourself an enormous disservice, because you're not going to get to go and partake in the many things that these places have to offer, and too many people in the United States and perhaps in Australia and Canada right now are writing off entire regions of the world, saying there's nothing for us to learn here because the government said it's a bad place to go. And they're not going to avail of themselves of the many opportunities that are in those places, including here in Mexico, despite the earthquakes.
Yeah, well, the earthquake warnings at least.
Yeah.
But one of the things I also learned from Doug Casey that I loved was he used to say, and I think he still says this, that he decides on where he wants to travel based on where the U.S. State Department has a warning. Because he says...
It's a good contrarian indicator.
It totally is, because, for example, they've got a warning right there in Michoacan. They got a warning in Acapulco, Mexico. It's awesome. Like, if you've been there, you know that it's like no big problems at all, nothing at all. But he says, well, first of all, there's not going to be a lot of Americans there. So it's going to be generally like the hotels won't be as full or whatever. They'll probably be cheaper prices. And in general, what I found too, and maybe you've got some experience on this, is when you travel to some areas that have some problems, whether it's a drug war caused by the government or maybe some sort of civil war caused by status or whatever it is, those places seem to be almost like the coolest, nicest places to go, because when people really kind of go, hey, there might be some danger here, all of a sudden everyone's really polite.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you find that almost universal. I mean, I found that on my travels almost universally. I have my wife and I kind of follow a little concept that we devised a few years back called crisis vacationing. And it's basically we go to places that have been recently hit by either man-made or natural disasters. I remember going to Mumbai after the terrorist attacks there in 2008, and it was about the safest place that you could have been in India at that time. And we were greeted, with open arms by the people, by the Mumbakers, and
tourists. Thank you for coming.
They were very, very happy for us to, bring our dollars or dirham. We were staying in United Arab Emirates at the time, but I remember getting over there, and we went to Cafe Leopoldo, which was kind of ground zero of this siege, and there were still bullet holes in the wall, and we inadvertently arrived a month after the attacks had happened, and they were holding a candlelit vigil that we didn't know was kind of on the schedule. And it was a very humbling experience, and it was very solemn, and lots of the wait staff there had friends or family who had become victims in this attack. And the people there were so very happy that we were there. I remember being interviewed by the Hindu Times, and the journalist saying, please tell your friends and family that this is a great place to come. We need customers, we need people to stay in our hotels, we need people to visit our restaurants and engage in commerce. And those places that have just been that have just suffered very serious disasters, that's the place, not only that, as a side benefit you get sweet upgrades and discounts and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's just kind of a bonus, but these people are suffering, and that's really where your hard-earned dollars are best spent. Not sitting on the other side of the ocean saying, oh gee, those poor old people over there, I hope I never have to go there. It's actually going and interacting with people, and deploying much needed capital in those situations that I think it's just a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that's a very anarcho-capitalist way of looking at things, right? Because what's going on in Puerto Rico, they got hit by a hurricane recently, and really wiped out a lot of the stuff on the island. So a lot of crypto people said, hey, they have really good there. A lot of Americans don't even have to pay tax if they move there. And let's all go there. They got enough infrastructure for us to do crypto stuff. And then on the sort of socialist, left-leaning media, they're like, look at these guys trying to take advantage of the island.
Yeah,
right? Exact opposite way of thinking.
Yeah, that's always the kind of the prevailing narrative of people who, you know, they'll wish the best for some people off far, and they won't leave a tip, you know, for their waiter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all lip service paid to these, you know, paid to the poor people in some other place, and those people, you know, they're oh so empathetic that they can't imagine actually having to go there, because, you know, wouldn't that pull their heartstrings? Well, you know. I guess we don't want those kind of people in those places anyway, but
no,
there's
absolutely.
definitely a lot to learn about it. You know,
yeah, no, it's very interesting, and I only have a few minutes. I'm going to the airport yet again, which I almost do every day. But I do want to get into International Man and what you offer there, and so people know. For example, at the Dollar Vigilante, if you don't know, we do 2 newsletters a month, and every newsletter we do an expatriate interview. So we interview people from around the world. We say, oh, you live in whatever. We've almost interviewed people from probably about 50, 100 countries now. What's it like? What are the good things? Where to stay? We have our own groups and stuff like that, and you do something quite similar. So why don't you just let us know what you do at International Man and why people should check it out?
Yeah, so I guess sort of broadly speaking, from a, you know, kind of 40,000 foot view, we just try to open people's eyes and perspective to a kind of beyond borders mentality. You know, so much of the public discourse and rhetoric over the past few years has been about insular mentality. It's been about nativism and you know, borderline jingoism, and we try to just show people that there are other places and other opportunities around the world, both for yourself and your capital, be it investment opportunities or, you know, places to spend your most valuable resource, which is your time. And there's no shortage of wonderful places around the world for those who care to open their eyes and take a look.
Yeah, coming from 2 people who have visited many places, almost everything you hear on the news is never the way it is, right?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see that mainstream news tends to be suffering
yes, that's great.
Pretty harshly right now, because there's a much more important narrative for anyone who again cares to take a look, and no doubt your viewers of this podcast are the type of people who are inclined to look beyond what they hear and what they're told, and to question things. And you know, I think it was Aristotle who said that the mark of an educated mind is to be able to entertain an idea without necessarily accepting it. So don't believe everything you hear. Go out and see it for yourself. And as Doug Casey likes to say, learn by doing.
Absolutely. So check it out at internationalman.com. So Doug Casey and Joel are both involved there. I just checked out the blog because I didn't know you were involved in it until just recently. I hadn't gone there for a while and saw a bunch of great articles. So check it out. We'll have the link to that down below. You'll also be at Anarchapulco probably. Also, probably at the Dollar Vigilante Summit. We'll be talking a lot more about this kind of stuff. So yeah, check it out in the links down below. And I guess that's it. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to ask you. Oh, there was one more thing. I'm probably going to go to Iraq with Doug Casey in November. Are you planning on going to that, or you're in trouble with the daughter, so probably not so much.
Yeah, you know, there's the idea of crisis vacationing that I spoke about before. As with all things, is subject to the law of declining marginal utility. So,
yeah.
You know, I would recommend for families with young kids, maybe sunbaking on the sands of Brazil's Fortaleza instead of Iraq's Fallujah, perhaps.
No, totally understand. You are traveling with your daughter for the next few months. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure you'd probably be coming along,
Absolutely.
Right? So yeah, Doug invited me, so I'll probably be going with Luke Rudowski if we are changed as well. Nothing's for sure. Everything can change, but probably in the next few months. We're going to Iraq. Check it out. I have no idea what to expect there, but that's the whole point of it, is that we can go to a place like that. We can tell people this is what we saw, right? Because it's not what they see on their television. Isn't nothing even close to the truth. So yeah, we'll have all the links down below. Check it out. He'll be at Anarchapulco, one of the coolest guys around, one of the best writers. Check out his writing on internationalman.com. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.